welcome back to the last round of the LTC Sunday Rebound. It's round 6, there's no top 8 recording, and we have a spicy one, a very aggressive matchup, Ellie and Ellie against Raph and Mikey. I would personally expect Raph and Mikey to take the lead here, simply because unless the Rakdos deck is extremely fast, there's basically nothing to do against the combo plan. I think it's the same Raph and Mikey list we have seen in the previous videos. So it's not the go-to combo deck that would put down Raph and Mikey on turn 3 or turn 4 rather consistently and then win with an Emrakul or the Worm. But instead a bit more mid-rangey variant, I would say. And also including more targets than just those two. The Ellie list is also kind of interesting. We also had that on cam against Lightpaws, I guess. Leaning more into the CMC2 Ellie than the list that Shakuya played at the CDF. If you haven't seen the deck tech, definitely check it out. Really interesting pile he put together there. And yeah. As I said, goes in a different direction than the CMC2 Ellie builds. The CMC2 Ellie builds play more one drops, try to go for some synergies with the Brickmaster, things like how's it called? Background, the black background, Cultists of the Absolute, I think. So going for some sex strategies. There is a fair share both decks go for, I would say. From playing the deck myself, I haven't touched the CMC2 Ellie version, but rather the CMC3 Ellie version from Shakuya. And I think the CMC3 version is better simply because it's much more explosive, and whenever you have a life gain advantage, then the 3-mana Ellie provides spontaneous wins, depending on the board, depending on the situation, of course. But yeah. So a relatively slow start from the Rakdos deck, I would say. In this particular matchup, I would try to go down or find a 1-drop into the 2-drop Ellie to get as much pressure as possible. Here we have a summon B. It's not Behemoth. Something comes down, destroys a non-land permanent. And I think for the second time it ticks up, it does the same. Was tried in a couple of Reanimator decks. I think it only survived for Aminatu, since you can flicker it. It basically acts as the Ashen Rider. Ashen Rider can, of course, get rid of lands too. Then there's the new Marvel 10-mana creatures, also a colorless one that on ETB would destroy non-land permanent. So there's quite some design in that direction, and it's obviously hard to beat for fair game plan, as the Rakdos pile is going for. We have a Forsaken Miner. That's a cool one. Again, with the CMC3 Ellie, you target the opponent, which means you have enough black mana, you can just loop the miner and deal 2 damage all over again. I would say this time a rather slow start on the opposing side. Casting a Fertile Ground. Oh, here's the Cultist, by the way. And in response to the Pyrokinesis, that's very powerful. That's very powerful. Ellie seems to go to the graveyard. Maybe there's an unearth. Oh no, okay. He's correcting it. So now the Cultist is more or less useless. I mean, that's the problem with these commander synergistic cards. I think it's an okay card. I really like playing it in Yuri and decks like that. Really nice build around card, but then again, sometimes it can really mess up your lineups. So here we have the apprentice, the marionette apprentice bringing a servo token. Yeah, and I don't know, like, still looks to be rather slow. Primeval Titan coming down. Buys the Rakdos players some time. I mean, unless you find... There could be a command beacon to go for LE3 in order to sacrifice some creatures into Ellie's ability. Then you would drain additional life due to the apprentice, and maybe you have like a big Yuri. That could be a go, but it takes some time for sure. So let's see. Okay, recasting the Brickmaster. Probably just swinging in. Okay, only with the servo. Yeah, makes sense. You want to keep the marionette and you also want to keep Yuri in case you can find something to sacrifice a couple of creatures. I think there aren't that many. There's Goblin Bombardment. There's Ellie itself. There might be Sephiroth, but Sephiroth only sacrifices one creature, so that's definitely not enough. So yeah, I think it comes down to Goblin Bombardment or Command Beacon here in order to take the lead. The question is if they will survive another, or the first Raph and Mikey swing on 20. That's 13 damage here, and depending on the target, might not be too attractive. Then again, I mean, if your deck would provide a safe win condition by playing only those two targets, okay. Going for the summon again, hard casting it to get rid of the cultist. Yeah, I can see that. Then again, you have a blocker for Ellie. Okay, Ellie gets flying, I think. If I remember correctly. The enchantment gives flying, so might be fair to go for that. We will see. Honestly, I don't really see a way out here. 14 HP is a lot. So far, I mean, there's one blocker which will probably block. I think the Behemoth has flying too, right? Yeah, it has flying too. So that's not even a thing. Oh, the cultist is gone. Never mind. So Ellie has no flying anymore. But then you just block Ellie, or you would probably rather block Yuri. Oh, and that's a Goblin Bombardment. Okay, that's huge. That's huge. That could steal the game here. Not entirely sure, but is there a better play? I think there is no better play, to be honest. So the bombardment, yeah, comes down. Now you probably swing in to create another fungus. Cordyceps. Then each activation for as long as the marionette is on field would deal 2 damage. And then you can... So that's 6. Yuri is growing by 3. That should be enough damage here. Unless I forgot something. Even before you block. And there is also the Forsaken Miner. Oh yeah, and he thinks about that. So with the Forsaken Miner, there's definitely enough for the Goblin Bombardment. Since the Goblin Bombardment is targeting the opponent, you commit a crime and you can bring it back. It enters tapped, but it doesn't really matter. So the opponent sacrifices this one. And there is another crime committed to bring it back. Yeah, and that's more than enough to kill the opponent. Yuri is at 5 already. 6 now. So it would be 8 additional damage. And that's GG. Okay. really came down to that one Goblin Bombardment. I'm not sure. I mean, a random flip from Raph and Mikey could have done something. Then again, it really depends on how many targets there are. We're going over to round 3, 2 games played in 25 minutes here. Since I accelerated the gameplay, it's only 10 minutes. Going for the Lizard on turn 1. That's an interesting one. I feel like, I mean, I get behind playing the card, but you are likely not going to offspring this thing very often because the deck is playing rather not so many lands in order to make use of the trigger too often. And that's why I think the last time I saw this card was in a Gidrock list when Tototaker played it at the Clash of Commanders. And in Gidrock, it's actually a pretty good card because you can easily make 2 of those creatures. And then sometimes you have 2 or 3 land drops a turn, which deals 6 damage. That's fine, I would say. But here in an aggressive deck like that, it's not too crazy. May coming down, also not the best card against a deck like Raph and Mikey. Then again, we're looking at Verdant Catacombs. I think there seems to be an interaction spell in hand. Yeah, a Flame Slash to get rid of May. I think I would have rather cast Ellie here. Again, you need to respect the pace that Raph and Mikey bring to the field. And since you're playing Rakdos, you can't really do that much against all those big creatures. Dismember is not enough to kill Raph and Mikey. There are a handful of interaction spells. Snuff Out. Maybe they likely not play Bitter Triumph and stuff like that. So Play of Malice could be a thing. Now with the Lizards, it's even active. Cory's Steel Cutter coming down. Yeah, it's okay. The 1-drop that followed was not really the card that I would hope to draw in a deck like that. I think it's in terms of power level for a red 1-drop being a 2/1. It's quite a good addition to those mono red decks. Because if you think about it, back then, an Elite Vanguard was just a 2/1 vanilla for 1 white. This thing in the late game brings a robot token, I think. So that's quite an upgrade. But here in a 2-color deck, I feel like there are better 1-drops. That's a Seething Song. Okay, from the Secret Layer. Which ends up in a Raph and Mikey cast. What are we going to find? Again, another time, the summon. That's brutal. So, coming over for 14? Oh no, it's a 9/9. So it's actually 16. The opponent was at 17, going down to 1. Let's see. Maybe there's a land drop. Maybe we have another. Oh, the land drops are at Mesa, which means it's not available. Yeah, that's likely going to be GG. There needs to be a very specific line of cards or set of cards. You cannot go for the CMC3 Ellie anymore, which seemed to be the case here, or seemed to be the plan actually. But now, since you don't have enough life anymore to pay the ability, yeah, and that's the GG. Makes sense. Cool game. Quite a fast one for a best of 3. That's it from this small event. Regarding tournament content, we will see each other with the next Clash of Commanders, which will be played in September. For the meantime, we will have our regular content from the studio and a couple of other videos that you can look forward to. With that being said, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in, and we will see each other in the next one.